Muckle. That's Wendy. Actually, there she is. Wendy's Executive Director of Ottawa Inner City Health, so all the way from Ottawa. Please put your hands together for Wendy Muckle, please.
Do you have my presentation? Oh, good. Oh, there it is. Thanks. I wasn't looking in the right direction as usual. So hi, everybody. I'm really happy to be here and happy to meet all of you. The Reach 3 gang have had a great time in Vancouver, and as I think everybody's told you, we were very impressed yesterday with our tour of Portland Hotel Society sites. So I'm always a bit embarrassed when I come to Vancouver because you guys always seem so far ahead of us. So if nothing else with my presentation, you'll get to feel at least a little bit superior. To call this what I'm going to present to you research is a bit of a stretch, but I did think it would be maybe of interest to people because this is just a program evaluation that we completed fairly recently, and I wanted to use it as an illustration of how we were able to use the information which we collect ourselves for our own operational purposes to actually inform our practice and to hopefully improve the quality of services that we're able to provide to people. So this is an evaluation of a program for our women, but I'll just tell you briefly a little bit about Ottawa Inner City Health. So we were started by a group in the community in 2001 to coordinate care for people who are chronically homeless with complicated health needs. So we've been in place, this is actually our 10th year anniversary. And we started with specialized shelter-based programming, and in fact the one I'm going to show you about today is a shelter-based program, but we have gradually added on more specialized housing and supported housing, and about a quarter of the places that we have for people to stay right now are in fact housing units, not shelter. We serve adult men and women living with complex needs. We don't serve youth, and we don't serve families, except of course all of our people actually are members of families. But for example, we don't take care of moms, dads, and kids as a family unit. We have a strong focus, pretty much an exclusive focus, on working with people who live with severe mental illness and overwhelming addiction. So concurrent disorders, if that's what it's called here, is kind of our game. That's the kind of people that we choose to work with. And initially our focus was really on the chronically homeless, and we've been using a population-based approach to our service development. And so over the time that we've been in place, due probably in part to our effort, but in part to the efforts on the whole community, the proportion of people who are chronically homeless in our population in Ottawa has decreased rapidly and dramatically. But we still have a lot more work to do on people who are episodically homeless, so people who return to shelter repeatedly. And in doing more work in engaging people very early on in their careers of homelessness and being able to identify people who are likely to become the chronically homeless and engaging with them at an early stage and trying to provide effective interventions to basically make sure that people don't ever achieve that title. And we are very much all about our principles, and that really kind of is who we are. We're very much rooted in the conviction that people have the capacity to change and that communities have the capacity to solve complicated problems. And we believe that if they didn't, the human race would not have survived. And so that really sort of undermines everything, or not undermines, but underpins everything that we do. And we're guided by many principles. And I'm going to list some of them there only because they sort of speak to what was important to us in the evaluation. So all of the programs that we operate from a harm reduction approach. But one of the things that you can see in that very long list, one of the things that also is very important to us is that we are an NGO, a non-government organization, but incorporating the academic world into the somewhat messy world that we live in is really important to us. So it really is important to us to be able to prove that what we say we do, we actually do, and to be able to prove that what we do makes a difference. So we have a fairly strong focus in the organization on trying to incorporate evidence either that we've generated or that we've learned from somewhere else into our practice, and then evaluating what impact that has. So this is a story about some of the women in our community, and historically in Ottawa, the proportion of people who were homeless between men and women was about 80% male and about 20% female. And over the last 10 years, there has been a shift in that, and there are more women who are homeless than there were before, and the complexity of needs in that population has shifted dramatically. So we were all kind of riding along, everything was as it always was until the summer of 2006. And in the summer of 2006, which is known in Ottawa as the summer of crack, the price of crack in the homeless community in the downtown core went from $10 a rock down to about $3, at one point $2.50 a rock. So, yeah, I know. And that changed the whole face of what was happening in our community, because it became the cheapest substance that people could access. And at the same time, there was a lot of initiatives underway to get people who were severely mentally ill, not addicted, out of the shelters. And so all of the space that was being freed up by those people moving out very quickly became filled with men and women who were addicted to the cheap crack that was newly available. Ottawa has always been a crack city, don't get me wrong, and crack has always been the drug of choice. But this just took people who used a certain amount. They used to use what they could afford with $10, and suddenly they could afford a whole lot more. So the numbers of people addicted and the intensity of addictions changed in about a 3-week period, and it was not something anybody, I hope that you guys never experience that kind of change in demographics and substance use. So women who previously had not been in the shelters started to flood into the shelters, and so there was a second women's program developed at one of the shelters, and that was in place and going along. But after a couple of years of operation, we realized that there were a group of women, and not tremendously old, kind of 25 to 35-year-old women, who had been in that shelter for all of that period of time and were clearly going nowhere. And these women were not quiet. This was a group that had tons of interaction with the criminal justice system, lots of challenges in their lives, which sort of played out in the whole community. And it was very clear that the conventional systems and the conventional services that were being made available to women in that shelter were not engaging these women and did not work for them. And so Inner City Health was asked to try to develop some specialized programming to try to more effectively address the needs of those women. And so this is the evaluation of that program 2 years after it was implemented. So the thing that we did that was different than had been done in any of the other programs for women was that we integrated physical, mental, and substance use treatment right in the program. So if you were staying in the general shelter, there were nurses that came in, there was mental health services that came in, there were substance use counselors that came in, but they all came from different organizations, and you had to organize your services yourself. Women were able to stay in a special part of the shelter where they could be 24 hours a day, where there was staffing for them 24 hours a day, and the team that worked with them all came from different organizations but worked as one team. So we completely and totally integrated. And substance use treatment, and by that I mean concurrent disorders treatment, so weekly, low threshold concurrent disorders treatment group was actually provided to them right in the shelter, as was their mental health care, as was their physical health care. And so this was an entirely, different way for us to be able to provide services to this population. And we really focused on trying to engage those who we believed had the greatest challenges to housing. A lot of our referrals came from police, from the mental health courts, from the drug courts, so really people who were leading an active and busy lifestyle. So the average sort of women who would come into that unit is, for us, young. This was the average age in our programs around 45. So we had a lot of people who were in their 20s to early 30s, usually long-time injection drug users, and almost universally people involved in commercial sex trade work. Extensive history of conflict with the justice system, and of course, as I'm sure you can appreciate, many people were had been involved in child welfare system and then the criminal justice system. And in fact, many had, as I have here, a negative housing history. Many of them had actually never been housed. They had been really institutionalized in some, for basically all of their lives. They had been in foster care, they had been in, juvenile homes, they had been in and out of psychiatric hospitals, in and out of jail. So it was certainly very difficult